I carried the queen's mark on my neck for the whole of a winter and a spring, and I called it a chilblain. I was 24, an omega, a chambermaid in the Winter Palace of Vael, and the woman who had put the mark there, on the longest night of the year, in the red dark of a sick room, with the poison still moving in her own blood, and neither of us, afterward, ever saying a word about it, was Seraphine, third of her name, Queen of Vael and the Cold Marches. She was 31. She was an alpha. The court called her the Winter Queen, and they meant it the way you mean a thing about weather, that she was beautiful, and that she would kill you, and that you could not argue with her any more than you could argue with the snow.
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
She held the throne and the council, and in every way the heralds would admit to, and several they would not. The whole of the realm, from a high, cold hall of gray northern stone, where her ancestors' names were cut into the floor in worn brass, and where a chambermaid had no business standing unless she was carrying a fire basket or a chamber pot, which I was, most days one or the other. I had spoken perhaps 30 sentences to her in my 4 years in the palace. 2 of them had been the 2 I said on the longest night, when she looked up at me out of a fever that should have killed her and asked me a question no sovereign had ever asked a girl who carried her ashes. And I answered it honestly, the way you answer honestly when your hands are the only warm thing left in the room, and your body has decided, before your mouth has, that you will not lie to this person again as long as you live. I'm going to tell you about the morning the entire court of Vael stopped breathing to watch the Winter Queen come down off her own dais, in front of 200 lords and ladies and the envoys of 3 realms, and kneel. But I have to go back first, because the kneeling is not the part that mattered. The mattering had already happened, months before, in a sick room that smelled of cold iron and fear and something else underneath. A green-black wrongness in a cup of spiced wine that I have spent my whole life able to smell, and that, on the longest night of the year, was the only reason my queen did not die. If you want the uncensored, too warm for YouTube version of this story, the parts I cannot tell you here, the things said in the dark with the glove off, it is on my Patreon, link in the description. Tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe. Let me go back to the beginning of me, because the beginning of me is the only thing that explains why I let a queen's claim sit on my neck for half a year and called it a winter sore. I was born in the lower town under the palace walls, in the steam and tallow of the laundry quarter, the daughter of a palace laundress and a man who carried coal up the hill until his chest gave out when I was 7. My mother was an omega who washed the linen of people whose names she was not permitted to say aloud. She raised me and my sister on the laundry work, and on a small, fierce gospel that I have only lately understood was not cruelty but armor, that an omega's safety is the quiet she keeps, that the worst thing a girl like us can do is be noticed, that to be looked at by the great is to be, sooner or later, used by them, and that the whole art of surviving in the shadow of a palace is to become a useful pair of hands with as little girl attached as you can manage. She taught me to be invisible before she taught me to read, though she taught me that too, in secret, by candle end, because she had a heresy in her that she passed to me along with the fear, which was that a servant who can read and will not be seen reading knows everything that happens in a house, and that knowing is the one kind of power they cannot take off you. She died of the lung rot when I was 17, the slow drowning that takes laundresses. And I took my sister and our mother's place on the palace rolls, and I did the only thing the steward said a girl like me could rise to, which was to leave the steam of the lower town and go up the hill into the palace proper as a chambermaid, where the work was lighter and the linen was finer, and the rule was exactly the same. Be a fire laid in a cold grate before anyone wakes. Be a chamber pot emptied before anyone sees. Be nowhere. Be no one. Be needed and unnamed. Let me tell you about my sister, because she is the reason I was the maid who never said no. And you will not understand the next part without understanding that there was a reason. That the keeping small was not weakness, but the most load-bearing thing in 2 girls' lives for 10 years. When our mother died, I was 17 and Win was 11. And there is a thing that happens to an 11-year-old orphan girl in a palace lower town that I will not describe on this channel, but that you can guess. And I decided, in the week after we buried our mother in the servants' ground with no stone, that it was not going to happen to my sister. So I made myself indispensable to the household above stairs, where it was safer, and I took Win up with me as a seamstress's runner. And I worked every double the steward would give me, and several he would not. And I took the bitter scent-dampening herbs the old laundresses brewed, wormwood and rue, the drink that flattens an omega's scent to almost nothing, partly so the men of the guard would not look at me twice, and partly because there was no room, in those years, in the box bed Win and I shared under the eaves, for my own body to want anything. There was room for a child's grief, and the rent we still somehow owed, and the herbs and the rhoda and nothing else. And a body that wants things in a life with no room for wanting is just another mouth. And I had enough mouths. I made myself a pair of hands, and I want to be plain that it worked, that it carried 2 girls to safe ground, that Win is a married seamstress in the cloth town now with 2 children, and a husband who is gentle with her, that I did that, the keeping small did that. And so when Seraphine of Vael said to me much later, in the dark, "You took the only safe shape they offered you, and you got so good at it that no one ever made you be anything else," she was right, but only half right, because the safe shape was not only a cage, it was also a raft. It carried 2 people to shore. The trouble with a raft is that once you reach the shore, you go on holding it over your head. You go on walking bent, under a weight that is no longer there. And it took a queen sitting very still with her bare hands open and refusing to cross a room to make me understand that I could, at last, after 17 years, set the raft down. I was good at the work. I will say it plainly, because the quiet ones never do and someone should. I was very good. I had the thing they cannot teach a girl, the thing the old housekeepers called a feel for a room. I could walk into a chamber where something was wrong and know it was wrong before I could have told you why, could tell from the set of a fire whether the lady of the room had slept, could move through a hall full of the great and grand and never once be seen, and never once miss a word that was said over my bent head, because the great talk freely in front of servants the way you talk freely in front of a chair. And I had the other thing, the thing my mother gave me with the herbs and the candle end reading. A nose. An omega's nose, sharpened by a laundress's training, by years of telling clean from foul and fresh from turning, and well from sick by smell alone. I could smell a fever 3 days before it showed. I could smell which of the kitchen hands was with child before she knew. I could smell, it would turn out, the difference between mulled wine and mulled wine with death stirred into it, on the longest night of the year, when no physician in the realm could. And that nose, which my mother gave me so that I might keep myself unnoticed and alive, is the thing that made me, in the end, impossible to keep unnoticed ever again. I should tell you what she was, the queen, because the Winter Queen makes her sound like a season, and she was not a season, she was a weather system, and you cannot understand what she did to me without understanding what 11 years on that throne had done to her. Seraphine was never meant to rule. That is the first thing, and the court knew it and never said it, the way a household knows and never says the thing that explains everyone in it. She was the second child. Her elder sister, Isor, had been the heir, raised to it from the cradle, the bright one, the loved one, and Seraphine had been the spare, raised, as spares in royal houses are raised, to be useful and quiet and married off well to seal whatever alliance the realm needed sealed when the time came. Raised, in other words, an alpha princess given an omega's education, taught to want nothing, decide nothing, hold nothing, and wait to be spent on a treaty like a coin. And then Isor died. A fever, a winter, a thing no one could have stopped, when Seraphine was 20, and the coin that had been raised to be spent was put instead, overnight, untrained and unready and grieving, onto the cold throne of Vael, into a council of gray old lords and ladies who had run the realm through a child heir's minority and had every intention of going right on running it through a spare princess's reign. She had been queen for 11 years, and in those 11 years I learned later, with the glove off in the dark, she had not once been allowed to choose a single thing. They chose her ministers and her wars and her gowns and the words she spoke from the throne. And now, in the winter I am telling you about, they had settled on the last thing of hers there was left to choose for her, which was who she would take to her bed and her bond and the getting of an heir, and they had chosen, and the choosing was a knife I did not yet know was at all our throats. Her scent was frost and black amber. I knew that before I knew anything else true about her, the way the whole palace knew it, because an alpha that walled cannot fully wall, and when the queen passed down a corridor, the cold note came 2 steps ahead of her, like the chill off a window before your hand reaches the glass. And the pages straightened, and the talk died, and the very fires, I would swear to you, seemed to stand up taller in their grates. She wore gray, and she wore silver, and she wore, always in every public hour, gloves, fine gray kidskin gloves, a monarch's gloves, because a Queen of Vael does not touch the world with her bare hand and is not touched by it. And I had been in that palace 4 years, and tended 1,000 fires in the room she stood in, and I had never once, until the longest night, seen Seraphine of Vael with her hands bare. The gloves were the wall made into a thing you could see. I did not understand then that a wall is only ever built by someone who has been hurt over it. I thought she was cold. I thought the way the whole realm thought, that the Winter Queen was made of the same gray stone as her hall. I was wrong about her the way I was wrong about everything in those years. The way you are always wrong about the people you have trained yourself not to look at directly. I had decided what she was so that I would not have to keep noticing her, and then the longest night took the decision out of my hands. It came in the deep of midwinter, on the night of the long dark, which in Vael is the year's longest night, and the one feast the whole court keeps. And it came the way the worst things always come, dressed as an ordinary evening. I was on the chamber rota for the royal apartments. My work that night was simple, and it was the work I had done 100 nights. Keep the fires high in the queen's rooms, because the long dark is bitter, and the gray stone holds the cold like a grudge, and have the warmed wine ready when she came up from the hall, because the queen took a cup of spiced wine before she slept. Every night, the same cup mulled with the same southern spices, carried up from the kitchens and kept warm at her own hearth by whichever maid had the rota. And that night the maid was me. I want to tell you what those next hours were, because everything that came after was decided in them. And people who tell a story like this skip the part where the 2 women actually meet, because the actual meeting is not a dance in a bright hall. The actual meeting is a woman's body trying to die on a cold floor, and another woman refusing to let it. And yet that was the meeting. That was the whole of it, and I would not trade it for any feast in any hall in any realm. She came up late from the long dark, alone, but for the 2 guards she left at the outer door. And she was tired in the particular way I had learned to read on her over 4 years of being furniture in her rooms. The tightness at the eyes, the half-inch too straight in the back, the tiredness of a woman performing being unbreakable for an entire court, and coming at last to the one room where she was permitted to put it down. Except that even there, she did not put it down. Because there was a maid at the hearth, there was me. She did not look at me. She never looked at me. She crossed to the fire and I poured the wine and I carried it to her on the small silver tray, the way I had 100 times. And as I lifted it toward her, the warm steam came up off the cup into my face, the southern spice, the clove and the dark wine, and under it, faint, green-black, wrong, a thing my mother's nose woke up inside me and screamed at, a bitterness that did not belong, the smell of the seed they used to kill rats in the granaries, ground fine and stirred into a queen's own cup. I have thought, in the years since, about the maid I had trained myself to be, and what she would have done, which is nothing. The maid I had been built to be does not smell a queen's wine. The maid I had been built to be is a chair, and I will tell you that for one whole second I was that maid, that the 17 years of be no one, be unseen, Do not make trouble for the great. The great do not thank the chair that trips them, rose up in me and very nearly closed my mouth. And then I thought of my mother teaching me the difference between clean and foul over a washtub. So you will always know, girl, so no one can ever poison you in your own kitchen. And I did the first unsmall thing I had done in my life. I put my hand over the cup as the queen reached for it. She went still. The whole room went still. A maid does not touch the queen's cup. A maid does not tell the queen, don't. And for a moment, her gray eyes came up off the fire and onto me. Actually onto me. The first time in 4 years she had looked at the maid and not through her, with an expression that was not anger, but something colder and far more dangerous. The expression of a woman who has survived 11 years of a council that wants her gone by treating every sudden movement as a possible blade. "Explain yourself," she said, very quietly. And I did not have the words a physician would have. I had only my mother's words, and I said them. "It's in the wine, under the spice." And I watched her decide whether to believe a laundress's daughter over the silver service of her own kitchens. And I watched, with a cold drop of my own heart, the thing that told me she already half knew, that she had been waiting some time for exactly this. Because she did not say nonsense, and she did not call the guard to have the impudent maid whipped. She said, "How much have I?" and stopped, and I understood from the way she pressed the back of her gloved hand to her mouth that the answer was some. That she had taken a swallow from the same cup the night before and the night before that. That whoever was doing this had been doing it slowly, a little each night, the way you poison a queen you cannot afford to have die suddenly and have questions asked. And that tonight, the longest night, with the whole court drunk in the hall below, and a hard frost on every road out of the palace, was the night they had judged it safe to give her enough. I will not tell you the whole of that night in its medical particulars, because it was long and it was frightening, and some of it is hers. But I will tell you that I did not call the physicians, because she would not let me. If I am dying by my own kitchen, then I do not yet know which hand in this palace I can trust. And a queen who shows the council her own throat does not see the spring. And so it came down to the two of us, a poisoned sovereign and a chambermaid, behind a barred bedchamber door through the longest night of the year. And I did the things my mother had taught me over. I made her bring it up, and I made her drink the charcoal and clay the laundresses keep for the children who eat what they should not. And I kept the fire roaring and the furs heaped, and I kept her warm when the cold of it came into her. And I kept her breathing through the hours when her own body fought the gray seed. And I did not leave. I did not sleep. I knelt at the side of the great cold bed of the Queens of Vael. And I was, for one whole night, the only pair of hands in the realm between Seraphine of Vael and the dark. That is what it is to find the one whose hands your hands were made to answer. I did not know that was what was happening. I thought I was a maid keeping a sick woman alive till morning. I know now it was the rarest thing there is, the thing you can serve in a great house your whole life and never feel, which is the moment two people discover that one of them was made to stand exactly where the other one is falling. And somewhere in the blackest hour, when the fever was high and she was more than half out of her head, and I think she truly believed she was dying, she came lucid for a moment, the way the gravely ill do, a sudden clear window, and she looked at me kneeling there in the red firelight with my hands on hers, and she asked me the question. And I was past exhaustion, past the place where the trained maid lives, in the scoured clean country on the far side of fear, and I told her the second sentence, the true one, the whole of me handed over in a breath. Because I'm an Omega Majesty and a laundress's girl. And I've spent my whole life smelling what's wrong in great houses and saying nothing, so that nobody would ever notice me. I noticed you dying. I'm sorry. I watched it land. She had not smelled it on me. The wormwood and rue had held even through that whole night of sweat and fear. And so I had handed it to her on purpose, the one fact I had buried under 17 years of herbs and bent shoulders, and I did not entirely know why. except that I had been close to her frost and amber scent for the worst hours of her life. And some part of me, the part my mother had spent so long trying to drown for my own good, had wanted, just once before I went back to being a chair, to be seen whole by the most powerful person in the realm and not have to flinch from it. She looked at me a long time, the firelight going down between us, and then she did a thing I felt and told myself I had imagined. The thing I called for half a year afterward, a fever dream and a chilblain. She lifted one hand, and I realized, dimly, that at some point in the night, I had drawn off her gloves to feel the heat of her, that the Queen of Vael was barehanded for the first time I had ever seen. And she set her bare palm against the side of my throat, where the gland of an omega sits at the joint of the neck and the shoulder. And in the red dark, in a moment of feeling higher than I have words for, the thing that is half chemistry and half choice, and cannot be done by accident and cannot be done to an unwilling body, and I, kneeling half asleep on my feet, my own body having decided things my mind would refuse to know for half a year, felt only what I told myself in the morning was the press of a feverish mouth, the wandering of a sick woman's lips, a thing that meant nothing because she was out of her head and would not remember. And the fever broke before dawn, and she lived. And I went back down to the box bed under the eaves at first light, with a deep, warm ache at the base of my neck, and told myself it was the cold of the long kneeling on stone. You have to understand what a claim is, for the Omegas listening who already know, and for everyone else who has only heard it sung wrong in ballads. It is not a bite. The ballads make it a bite, and it is not. Acclaimed omega smells, to any alpha who comes near, like a door with a name already cut into it. It is the oldest and most binding thing one of us can do to one of us. It is not done in sick rooms by fevered queens. It is not done to chambermaids whose names you have never troubled to learn. It is not done, above all things, without the omega knowing, except that an omega drowned in wormwood and rue, an omega who has spent 7 years flattening her own scent to nothing, an omega trained by a frightened loving mother out of reading her own body the way she was trained out of reading her own worth. An omega like that can carry a queen's claim through a whole winter and a whole spring and call it a winter sore. Seraphine knew what she had done. I am certain of it now. She knew by the gray morning when the fever had broken, and she woke clear-headed in the wrecked bed with a bare-handed maid asleep against the bedpost, and a mark on that maid's neck that had not been there the night before. She had done the most binding thing an alpha can do, to a stranger, to a servant, in the extremity of her own near death. And then she had risen and put her gloves back on and become again the Winter Queen and made a decision I can only now forgive, which was to say nothing, to let me go on believing the night had been only what it plainly was, a maid saving a sovereign. Because think of what she was, a queen who had been allowed to choose nothing in 11 years, whose counsel was, that very season, arranging her bond to a great southern house to seal a treaty and head off away. A queen who had just discovered that someone close enough to reach her cup was killing her by inches. A queen who had, in the worst hour of her life, reached out and bound a laundress's daughter to herself in the one way that could never be undone quietly. What could she do with that, except bury it? A queen cannot wed her chambermaid. The realm would not stand it. The council would use it to call her unfit and finish what the poison had started. And the maid would be the first thing swept off the board, a serving girl who had got above herself, found drowned in the lower town or dismissed without a character, which in that world is the same death slower. She knew all of that in the gray morning, the way she knew everything, 3 moves ahead. And so she chose the only thing her whole walled life had taught her to choose, which was control, which was silence, which was to carry it alone and let the girl never know. She would have managed it too. She was the most disciplined woman I have ever known. She would have carried it to her grave and let me carry a chilblain to mine, and we would both have been, in the cold, safe way she had been taught to call safety, fine. But acclaimed Omega's body knows what her mind refuses, and acclaimed Omega cannot drink wormwood and rue forever. without her own blood going, in the end, to war with the herbs that hold it flat. And there was the other thing, the thing neither of us could have planned for, which is that she did not, after that night, go back to looking through me. She had looked at me once in the firelight and asked me the true question, and a wall that has been looked through once does not close again as cleanly as it was. She began carefully, a queen's carefulness, so slight that for a long time I told myself I imagined this too, to see me. It started in small things, the way the largest things always do. She kept me on the royal chamber rota. That was the first. A queen does not arrange the rota of the chambermaids, that is 6 layers of household below her notice, and yet somehow, that winter, it was always me who laid her fire and warmed her wine. Wine she now had brought up sealed from a kitchen she trusted, and which she did not drink until I had stood near it, because she had learned, without either of us saying it, to use my nose, to let the maid smell the cup before the queen drank. That was a strange and silent courtship that I did not know was a courtship. Every night, the Queen of Vael waiting, not drinking, until a laundress's daughter had come close enough to tell her the wine was clean. I thought she was being cautious about the poison. I did not understand that she had made me, quietly, the one sense in the palace she trusted, and that to a woman who could trust nothing, this was nearer to love than anything she had words for. And there was the thing she began to say. The first time I caught myself after that night, sinking into the deep curtsy a maid owes her queen, down onto one knee, eyes lowered, majesty. She stopped me. I thought I had given offense. I rose in a fright. I did not understand it. I understand it completely now. She had spent 11 years on a throne that everyone knelt to and no one chose, and she could not have told you then what she wanted, only what she could not bear. And what she could not bear was the girl who had stayed all night with her bare hands keeping her alive, kneeling to her like all the rest, as though she too were only weather to be braced against. It was, I know now, an entire confession, said 2 words at a time over a whole winter, by a woman who had never been permitted to make one. And there were the gloves. I had seen her barehanded once, in the sick room, in the red dark. And now, on certain late nights, when the fire was laid and the wine smelled clean, and there was no reason left for the maid to stay, and yet she had not dismissed me, she would sometimes draw off one glove, slowly, finger by finger, and set it on the table by the fire, and sit with one hand bare, and I came to understand, without being told, that this was the signal, that the glove coming off meant the queen had gone out of the room and left only the woman, that for as long as the gray kid skin lay on the table, I was not a maid in the presence of a sovereign, but a girl in a warm room with someone who had stopped for an hour having to be made of stone. We did not touch in those hours. We talked, or we did not talk. She asked me about the lower town, about my sister, about the herbs, about how a person learns to read by candle-end without being caught. I asked her, greatly daring the first night the glove came off, about her sister Izor, and she was quiet a long time, and then she told me, and that was the first wall down. A whole winter we did this, a bare hand on a table and 2 women on either side of a fire, not touching, and the mark at the base of my neck waking warm every time the frost and amber scent came near, and going to sleep again when she put the glove back on and became the queen and sent me down to the eaves. I told myself it was nothing. I was, it turns out, a very good maid and a catastrophically stupid omega, and the 2 of them lived side by side in me all that winter, and the spring they finally collided. They collided in front of the entire court of Vael. The council had chosen Lady Rocha Variel. I should tell you who that was, because it matters. House Variel held the southern passes, the rich grain country, and, more to the point, the road an army would have to take if the southern realm of Astray ever decided the cold marches were worth a war, which every generation or so it did. A bond between Seraphine and the Variel heir would knit the southern passes to the crown, would put Variel swords between Vael and Astray, would, the council said, buy the realm a generation of peace. And it was By every cold measure a council measures by, a good match, a wise match, the obvious match, and they had been steering the queen toward it for 2 years, and now they had run out of patience and named the day. There would be a great feast. At the turn of spring, the greening feast, when the Austray envoys themselves would be present to witness the betrothal of the Winter Queen to Lady Vael of the Southern Passes, 200 of the realms great in the high hall, and the matter would be done, and the queen would have been spent at last, the coin laid down on the treaty she had been raised from the cradle to be laid down on. And I laid the fires for the feast. I carried the warmed wine. I was furniture at the edge of the hall on the night my queen was to be promised to someone else, and I told myself, with the whole strength of 17 years of training, that this was nothing to me, that a chambermaid does not have feelings about whom the queen weds, that the warm ache at the base of my neck, which had been growing all spring, was a chilblain, and the tightness in my chest as Lady Vael rose in cloth of gold was the heat of the hall. I had been on my feet 30 hours. I want to be plain that this was ordinary, that 30 hours across a great feast in its 3 days of preparing was a normal cruelty of palace service, that I had done it many times, but I had never done it claimed. And I had never done it with my own body, half a year into a slow rebellion against the herbs and the denial both. And somewhere in the long heat of that hall, with the spring come up green outside, and 200 scents thick in the air, and the frost and amber of the queen cutting through all of them from the high table, as she rose to speak the words that would give her away, my body, which had waited a whole winter and a whole spring, chose that hour, the worst possible hour, the most public hour in the realm, to stop being held down. The herbs broke. The claim woke. And the heat I had never once in my life let myself have came up through 7 years of wormwood and half a year of denial all at once in the green spring warmth of the high hall of Vael, with the envoys of 3 realms watching the queen rise to be betrothed. I felt it go, and I had no name for it because I had never let it have a name. The hall tilted. And then the Queen of Vael came down off her dais. She came down the steps in front of the envoys of Austray and the assembled great of the realm and her own council, and the Lady Vael in cloth of gold, whom she was that hour to be promised to. And she crossed the open floor that no one had ever seen her cross for anyone. And she knelt, the Winter Queen who knelt to no one, who was knelt to by an entire realm. She knelt down on the stone of her own high hall and put her bare hands on me, the gloves stripped off and dropped somewhere on the steps behind her. And she gathered an Omega chambermaid and heat up off the floor against her, in front of everyone. And she lifted her head and looked at her court and her council and the foreign envoys and said, in the clear, carrying voice she used from the throne, the words that ended one story and began another, "This is the Lady Elowen. She has carried my mark since the long dark. She has been mine since the night she kept me alive when someone at this table tried to see me dead. I will hear the betrothal no further." What she did was a catastrophe. I want to be clear about that, because the way I have told it makes it sound like triumph. And in the moment, and for many days after, it was very nearly ruin. A queen does not break a betrothal of state in front of the envoys it was meant to honor. A queen does not announce to a council that wants her gone that she has bonded a servant. She had, in coming down off that dais, handed every enemy she had the knife they had waited 11 years to be handed. And she had done it knowingly, with her eyes open, 3 moves ahead as always. She had simply decided, in the half-second between the Lord's reaching hand and her own voice, that there was one thing she would not do 3 moves ahead, and for the good of the realm, and that thing was let me be carried off the floor by another alpha's hands while she watched from a throne and said nothing. She told me later it was the first wholly free choice she had made in 11 years, and that she made it in less time than it takes to draw breath, and that she has never once regretted it, and would burn the southern passes again tomorrow. But that night, when she carried me out of the hall, and the great doors closed on 200 faces, what she had bought us was not a happy ending. What she had bought us was a war on two fronts. Astray insulted on the southern road, and the council, at last, with everything it needed to move against her. And into the gap between those two fronts stepped the one person who had been waiting in it all along. She carried me to her own apartments, and she barred the door, and she put me in the great cold bed where the poison had nearly taken her, and she did not get in. That is the courtship. People want the courtship to be the grand gesture in the hall. The grand gesture in the hall was the easy part. The courtship was a queen not crossing a room. She told me everything in the gray days that followed, behind the barred door, with the realm shaking outside it. She told me about the second hour of the long dark, what she had done plainly, without softening it, in the flat exact voice she used for the worst truths. Because she had decided that having bound me once in ignorance, the one repair left to her was to never again let me not know a single thing. She told me she had claimed me. She told me she had no good account of why, only a true one. That she had spent a winter half aware of a maid who saw what no one saw. And that night she had been dying and had looked up out of the fever and found that maid kneeling with her bare hands, keeping the dark off, steady, unafraid, choosing to stay when staying could only cost her. And that something in Seraphine that had been locked since she was 20, and they put her on the throne, had simply reached out in the red dark and done the oldest thing there is, and that she had known it was unforgivable in the same breath she did it, and had risen and put her gloves back on, and spent half a year calling it the one ungoverned act of her reign and meaning to take it to her grave, so that the girl could go free and never know she had been bound to a queen who could not have her. And she told me the rest of her. The thing under the wall on the third night, with the glove off on the table between us. She told me what it was to be raised the spare, to be an alpha child given in Omega's breaking, taught to want nothing and decide nothing and hold nothing, kept soft and quiet and ready to be spent. They raised me, Elowen, to be exactly what they raised you to be, only in silk instead of wool. We are the same thing made in two different houses. And what it was to have her sister die and be lifted overnight onto a throne she had been trained out of being fit for, into the hands of a council that had every reason to keep her the spare she had been bred to be. She told me she had built the Winter Queen on purpose, stone on stone, the gloves and the frost and the "no one will ever decide a thing for me again" of it, precisely because she had spent 20 years being told she would decide nothing ever, and that the cost of that wall was that she had not, in 11 years, let one living soul see the woman behind it, until she had looked up out of a fever and found a maid she could not lie to, and recognized her. I recognized you, Elowen. You are doing the thing I did. You took the only safe shape they offered you, and got so good at it that no one ever made you be anything else, and that she had spent half a year furious at herself, and had understood somewhere in the spring that she was not furious that she had marked a stranger, but that she had, at last, at 31, wanted something. And the something was a girl who had hidden herself so completely that wanting her felt like a theft. And I told her my things too. The lower town, the laundry, my mother's gospel, and her candle end heresy, Wynne safe in the cloth town now with her children, how I had got my sister to dry land, and then gone on holding the raft over my head for years, because there was no one left to save, and I had never once worked out what a life that was only mine might be for. I told her, on the fourth night, with the glove on the table and the frost and amber gone soft and close, the thing I had never said to a living soul, which was that when she had said not to me the first time, that winter, some part of me that had knelt its whole life out of fear had wanted, just once, to stop kneeling on purpose, for someone, and not be afraid, and had been ashamed of wanting it, and had carried the shame all spring beside the mark, and called them both chilblains. And the Queen of Vael was quiet a long while. And then she said the line I have kept, the one I will keep till I die. You will not be ashamed of bending for someone who has earned it. You will be ashamed of bending for those who have not. I have not earned it yet, but I am going to. And when I have, you will tell me you choose this in your own words, like a free woman who means to keep it, and not like a maid saying, as you wish. I have spent my whole life being a coin other people spent. It would be a cleaner story if the only thing standing between us had been the two of us and our two matching ruined childhoods. It was not. There was the realm, and there was the council, and there was the law itself, and the terrible thing, the thing that kept me awake on the 5th night and the 6th, was that the law was not wrong. The move came as such moves came in Vael, dressed in the language of the law and of care. It was the Lord Chancellor, Morwenna Crail, who made it, an alpha of 70, gray as the hall, who had sat on the council through the old queen's reign, and Isora's brief shining promise, and all 11 years of Seraphine's, who had, more than any other soul, raised the spare princess into the controllable queen, and run the realm from the shadow of her throne. Chancellor Crail rose in the council 3 days after the feast, and she did not rage, and she did not gloat. She grieved. A claim, the Chancellor said, requires the free will of both. The law is clear, and the law is old. An alpha cannot bind an unwilling omega. And what, she asked the council softly, is the will of a chambermaid before her queen? Can a serving girl, whose place and bread and sister's safety and very life lie in the queen's hand, freely refuse that queen anything? Is there any such thing as the free consent of a servant to a sovereign? Or is every bond between the powerful and the powerless, however it dresses itself in firelight and tenderness, only the powerful taking and calling the taking love? I do not doubt the queen's heart, Chancellor Crail said, and I am told she had tears in her eyes when she said it. I doubt that a maid can say no to it. And a bond one party cannot refuse is not a bond. It is a leash. Yeah, and I lay behind the barred door and heard the shape of it come up through the palace the way bad news always travels, servant to servant. And I understood the trap of it completely. And the trap was that she was right. There was a gulf of power. The queen did hold my life in her hand. An Omega scullery maid could not, in the plain structure of that world, freely refuse her own monarch. And so the very thing that made Seraphine extraordinary, the not to me, the glove on the table, the chair she would not rise from, the I am not going to spend you, all of it was invisible to the law and would always be, because the law could not tell, was never built to tell, the alpha who shelters from the alpha who takes. And from the outside, in the cold, true language of the council, what had happened to me was precisely the thing the old law existed to prevent. I have made a hard peace with this since. Morwenna Crail's petition was a weapon, and it was also on its face the only argument in that whole council chamber that was about protecting a powerless Omega from a powerful Alpha. And in a different telling of this story, a telling where Seraphine had crossed the room on the 3rd night, where she had used the barred door to take instead of to shelter, where she was the alpha the law imagines when it writes itself, Morwenna Crail would have been the only soul in Vael doing right. The law is not stupid for imagining that alpha. That alpha is real. The law is stupid because it cannot tell that alpha from the one sitting in a chair across a room, with her hands flat on her knees, and it never could. And a realm that cannot tell taking from sheltering will, every time it is forced to choose, protect itself by cutting down the shelter. Because the shelter is the harder thing to see. There was only one thing wrong with Chancellor Morwenna Crail's beautiful, grieving, lawful petition. And I was the only person in the palace positioned to know it because I was the invisible one, the chair, the girl they all talked freely in front of. And I had a nose. It was the wine that undid her, in the end, the same as it had nearly undone my queen. I had spent half a year, since the long dark, unable to stop my nose doing the thing my mother trained it to. And in the days after the feast, carrying trays through a palace at war with itself, I caught it again, twice, that green-black wrongness, the ground gray seed, The granary death, faint under the spice. Not in the queen's cup this time. Her wine was guarded now like the crown jewels. I caught it on a tray going to the council's own withdrawing room, on the night before the petition was to be put to the vote. A tray of the spiced southern wine the council took, and under the clove and the dark grape, on one cup only, set at one place only, the wrongness. And I stood in the cold corridor with the tray bearer waiting and my whole trained body screaming at me to be a chair, be no one, do not make trouble for the great. And I made myself instead do the unsmall thing the second time, which is always harder than the first, because the first time you can tell yourself it was instinct, and the second time you know exactly what it will cost. I followed the wrongness. I went where a chambermaid may go and a lord may not, the back stairs and the linen passages and the servants' doors that open behind the arras of every great room. And I put myself behind the arras of the council's withdrawing room with a fire basket I did not need. And I did the thing my mother gave me along with the fear. I became furniture, and I listened, and I read the room. And I heard Morwenna Crail, who had wept in council for the powerless Omega, speaking to no servant and no equal, but to one frightened young clerk of the granary office, telling him where the next measure of the gray seed was to be left, and which cup it was to dress, and which place that cup was to be set. And the place was the Queen's, at tomorrow's vote, because the dissolution of the bond was never the point. The dissolution was only the lever. The point, it had always been since the long dark, was a dead queen and a council regency, and Morwenna Crail ruling Vael outright at last, with no inconvenient sovereign on the throne above her. And the Vael betrothal had been her engine too, the alliance she could complete for the realm once the troublesome queen, who kept refusing to be a coin, was finally, quietly, grievingly spent. I heard her say it. I, the chair, the maid, the one creature in the palace beneath everyone's notice, stood behind the arras with a fire basket and heard the Lord Chancellor of Vael lay out the murder of my queen. And I will tell you that the girl my mother built nearly stayed behind that arras forever, nearly carried what she had heard down to the eaves and buried it in the safe dark where servants bury everything they hear, because to come out from behind the arras with this was to stop being known in the loudest way a servant ever can, and there is no road back from that. And a maid who accuses a chancellor is a maid who hangs. I came out from behind the arras. I did not go to the queen. That is the part I am most proud of. And it is the part that tells you I had, by then, stopped being only the raft. If I had run to Seraphine with it, it would have been the maid saving the queen, one more secret thing in the dark between us. And worse, it would have been the word of a chambermaid against the Lord Chancellor. Exactly the unequal thing the whole council already believed me to be. They would have called it the desperate lie of a servant trying to keep her place in the queen's bed. And Morwenna Crail would have had me hanged for slander by sundown and poisoned the queen by the next long dark. No, I had spent my whole life learning how great houses truly work, who is invisible and who is believed, and where the proof of things is kept, and I used all of it. I went to the one person in the palace whose word no one could dismiss and who owed Morwenna Crail nothing, and that was Dame Hollis. I should tell you about Dame Hollis, because every true story has in it the old one, who has seen everything and can no longer be lied to. Dame Hollis was the mistress of the household. She was past 80. She had run the below stairs of the Winter Palace through 3 reigns. She had laid out the old queen's body and Isor's. She had hired my mother and hired me. She was not noble and not common, but the third thing a great house makes, the keeper of all its keys and all its secrets. And she had a way of sitting very still and letting people talk until they had said the thing they came in meaning never to say. And she had used it to settle the quiet wars of the household for 50 years. The great did not notice Dame Hollis any more than they noticed me. She was old furniture where I was new, but the great were wrong about her the way they were wrong about me, and she was the one creature in Vael that Morwenna Crail, who had bought or frightened every lord on the council, had never once thought to buy, because you do not think to buy the furniture. I went to Dame Hollis in her little room off the kitchens, and I told her what I had heard and where the proof would be, the gray seed in the granary clerk's keeping, the cup, the place to be set at the morning's vote. And the old woman listened the way she listened, still as stone, to the very end. And then she looked at me a long time, and she said the only thing she said, which was, "Your mother had that nose." I always wondered what the crown would do with it, if it ever once stopped to smell. "Sit down, child, we will not be carrying this to the queen. We will be laying it where the whole council must step in it at once, in the morning, in the light, with the cup on the table. And you, who heard it, will not be a maid accusing a chancellor. You will be a witness the mistress of the household stands behind. There is a difference, and Morwenna Crail taught it to me herself 40 years ago. It is not what is true that hangs a person in this palace. I will not give you every turn of the morning, because it was long and frightening, and some of it is the realms and not YouTube's. But I will tell you that it went exactly as Dame Hollis laid it, that the gray seed was found where I said it would be found, in the granary clerk's keeping, by the captain of the Queen's own guard, whom Dame Hollis trusted, and Morwenna Crail had never thought to court, that the poisoned cup was let be carried in and set at the Queen's place at the council table in the full light of the morning vote, with every lord watching, that the Queen, who Dame Hollis had told just enough and no more to play her own part in stillness, did not drink, but turned the cup, slowly, in her bare ungloved hand, and looked down its length at Morwenna Crail, and said, in the carrying voice from the throne, "Chancellor, my maid tells me this cup is wrong." My maid has been right about a cup once before. Sa, and I will tell you that the whole council watched the Lord Chancellor of Vael look at the cup she had dressed for her queen, and not drink it. And that her not drinking, in that silence, in that light, with the granary clerk already in the guard's hands and the gray seed already on the table, was a louder confession than any words, and that it was a chambermaid's nose and an old woman's 50 years of keys that brought down the woman who had ruled Vael from the shadows for a generation, and not one sword was drawn to do it. It was Dame Hollis, too, who asked me the question, the real one, the one under all the rest. And she asked it that same evening, when the chancellor was taken and the vote was forgotten, and the palace was loud with the thing that had happened, and the queen had been pulled away into the 100 urgent matters a near-overthrown realm demands, and I was sitting in the little room off the kitchens, shaking, at last, now that it was over, the way you only let yourself shake when it is over. Dame Hollis put a cup of plain, warm milk in my hands, the thing she had given frightened girls in that room for 50 years, and she sat down across from me, old as stone, and she said, "Now then, the realm is saved and the chancellor is fallen, and that is all very fine, and none of it is what I want to know. I am too old to be impressed by crowns and poison. I want one thing, child, and I want the true answer. Because I have been hearing people lie to me in this palace for half a century, and you will not be the first to manage it. Tell me." I did not keep small. I did not, for the first time in my whole life of doing it, reach for the answer that would make the powerful person's road easier. I thought about the glove coming off on the table. And I told Dame Hollis the truth, which was the worst and the best thing both, which was, it would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. Dame Hollis looked at me a long moment over her own cup. Then she nodded, once, the way you nod when a thing you suspected is confirmed, and she said, "Then you had best go and tell her that yourself, child," in those words, because that one, for all her frost and all her cleverness and all her 3 moves ahead, that one is sitting in her cold hall right now, having already decided for your sake to do the noble thing and let you go. She always does the noble thing. It is the only kind of love they ever let her practice. Somebody is going to have to teach her there is another kind. I am 83. I found her in the high hall, alone, with the braziers burning low and her gloves, both of them, back on her hands. I knew what the gloves meant. The gloves meant she had put the queen back on. The gloves meant she had decided something 3 moves ahead, and for the good of everyone but herself. And I understood, the way Dame Hollis had told me I would, that what she had decided was to be noble, to free me, to do the one generous thing her whole bred and broken life had ever taught her, that love was allowed to be, which is renunciation, which is the lover who lets go for your own good and calls the letting go the gift. And I understood, standing in the door of that cold hall, that if I waited for her to choose otherwise, I would wait until we were both old and gray as the stone, because she had built herself, stone on stone, into a woman who could give everything and take nothing, who would hold the door open her whole life and make the other person walk through it, so that no one could ever again say that Seraphine of Vael had spent a soul who did not freely spend herself, and that this meant the last step, the only one that mattered, was not hers to take and never would be. It was mine. It had always, since the night I put my hand over her cup, been mine. So I took it. I crossed the cold hall, the open floor she had crossed for me in front of 200, that no one crossed, that I, a chambermaid, now crossed for her with no one watching at all. And I came to where the Winter Queen of Vael sat gloved in gray, and already grieving the thing she had decided to give away. And I did not kneel. I want you to know that I did not kneel, not from pride, but because she had spent a whole winter teaching me not to. And this was the night the teaching was for. I stood in front of her, and I reached down and I took her gloved hand in both of mine, and I drew the glove off it, slowly, finger by finger, the way she had drawn off her own 100 times by the fire. I took the queen out of the room myself and left only the woman, and I set the gray kid skin on the arm of her chair, and I held her bare hand against my own face the way she had once set her bare palm against my throat in the red dark. And I said the thing I had come to say, in my own words, like a free woman who means to keep it. Dame Hollis says you've already decided to be noble and send me away for my own good. Don't you dare. I have spent my whole life letting people decide things about me by leaving. My father left. The world told my mother to leave us be no one. Every great soul in this palace decided what I was without once asking me. You don't get to be one more of them and call it kindness. I heard a chancellor plan your murder from behind an heiress, and I came out from behind it, which is the bravest thing a chair ever did, and I did not do it to save a queen. I did it to save you, the woman whose glove comes off by the fire. And I will not have saved you only to watch you give me away 3 moves ahead, because you're too well trained to believe you're allowed to keep a good thing. I'm choosing this, in daylight, in my own words, knowing everything I know, with no herbs in me and no fear on me and nobody's hand at my back. I choose to be yours and to have you be mine, and I will say it as many times and in as many halls as it takes to make you believe a free woman chose you. Now, say it back, not as a queen, like a woman who's allowed to want something, and the Winter Queen of Vael, who had not been allowed to want a single thing in 11 years on the throne, who had been raised a coin and built a wall and done every noble renouncing thing her whole life, because it was the only kind of love they ever let her have, looked up at the Omega standing over her with her bare hand pressed to a laundress's daughter's face, and she stopped being noble. She said it back. I am not going to tell you the exact words, because some things you keep, and the words Seraphine of Vael said to me in the low light of that cold hall, with her glove off and her wall down, and her whole frost and amber heart finally allowed to want out loud, are mine and hers and not YouTube's. But I will tell you, they were not as you wish, and they were not the renouncing gift she had walked in meaning to give. They were a free woman's words, said by a woman learning for the first time at 31 that she was permitted to be one. And I will tell you that the mark at the base of my neck, half a year old, woke up warm and has never once gone cold since. It is a year now the next greening since the queen came down off her dais. She did it again, the kneeling, but the second time she did it on purpose. In front of the whole court, at the binding. The realm had to be shown, you understand. A queen does not simply install a chambermaid beside the throne and expect the great to swallow it. There had to be a day and a hall and 200 witnesses, and the foreign envoys back again to see the thing made law. And in front of all of them, on the day she raised a laundress's daughter to stand at her side for the rest of both our lives, Seraphine of Vael came down off her dais a second time and knelt to me on the stone, the Winter Queen, knelt to by a realm, kneeling. And she took my hand and she said, so the whole hall could hear it, the line that finishes the one she started in the dark a winter before. You knelt your whole life out of fear. You will kneel to no one again, not even to me, least of all to me. Let them see their queen do it instead. I have knelt to nothing in 11 years. And the court of Vael, which had been so sure it would never stand for it, stood, every one of them, because there is a thing more powerful than rank in a hall, and it is the sight of someone who has never once bending freely for love in the light. I am the queen's consort now, which I am told is a great thing, and most days it does not feel like a great thing. It feels like a life, which is better. I did not stop working, not at first. You cannot take 17 years of hands out of a woman in a season. But Dame Hollis, who is 84 now and will, I think, outlive the stone, took me in hand the way she took my mother in hand once, and is teaching me, slowly, that the keeping of a realm's keys is only the laundry work of the great, the same nose and the same eye, and the same becoming furniture to hear everything, turned to a larger house, and that the girl who could read a great hall blind and smell death in a cup was never only a chair. She was a stateswoman. The realm had decided not to notice, and the realm, Dame Hollis says, was wrong, the way it is wrong about all its quiet women, and it is the great quiet joke of her long life that she has lived to see one of them put where the loud ones could not reach. Wynne came up from the cloth town for the binding with her children, and cried, and did not bow when I told her not to, and that undid me more than the whole court standing, more when a crail did not hang. The queen, 3 moves ahead even in mercy, judged that a hanged chancellor makes a martyr, and a confessed one makes a lesson. And so the old woman lives, stripped and watched, in a cold house in the north, and the realm tells the story of how she was brought down not by an army or an heir, but by a chambermaid's nose. And I am told there are mothers in the lower town now who tell their unnoticed daughters that story on purpose. And if that is the only monument I ever have, I will count my life well spent. The glove lives on the table on my side of the bed now. She gave me both of them on the night of the binding. I do. It means the queen has gone out of the room, and the woman has stayed. It means the most powerful soul in the realm has stopped for the night, having to be made of stone, and has chosen, the way she was never once let choose for the first 31 years of her life, to be, for one more hour, only a woman by a fire who wants something, and is finally, at last, allowed to say so out loud. Her name is Seraphine of Vael. My name is Elowen, of the lower town, and lately of the cloth and the keys and the high cold hall. The mark is hers. The choosing was mine. The glove is on the table, and the queen is not counting the hours, and neither am I. If you stayed to the end of this one, thank you. These stories take a long time to tell the right way, and you gave me an hour, and I know exactly what an hour is worth. If you want the parts I could not tell you here, the nights behind the barred door, the things said with the glove off, the uncensored version, it is on the Patreon, link in the description. Tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe so the next quiet woman's story finds its way to you. And if you are someone's chair, someone's chambermaid, someone's furniture, if you have spent your life being needed and never once seen, let this be the thing you take from it. The nose your mother gave you to keep you hidden was never only for hiding. Come out from behind the arras. You would be amazed what a quiet woman knows, and kneel to no one who has not, first, knelt to you.